Hello everybody. Today I will present you about the impacts of tourism and hospitality in Singapore. My name is Phan Tân Viet, as known as Chris, and my other teammates are Nguyễn Hữu Duy, Jason, Huỳnh Hoài Nam, Bob, and Minh Gong as me. And so the second slide will tell you more about the table of content. So this is the table of content. We have 6 parts. The first one is the introduction. The second one is the Singapore and the global impacts. The third one is the analysis of hospitality and tourism impacts on Singapore. The fourth one is the social and economic change. The fifth one is the conclusion. And the last but not least is a reference. So let's start first with the introduction. Singapore is a wealthy city-state in Southeast Asia. Once a British colonial trading post, today it is a thriving global financial hub and described as one of Asia's economic tigers. The population of Singapore is approximately around 5.3 million. Chinese account for more than 75% of Singapore's multiracial population, with Malays and Indian making up much of the remainder. The area is around 660 kilometers. The major language of Singapore is English, Malay, Mandarin, and Tamil. The currency of Singapore is the Singapore dollar. So the next slide is about the global impacts. I will leave all this to Minh, and he will tell you more information about this.
Hello guys, I am Minh Gong. I will introduce global impact to you guys. And first of all, Singapore has reaped substantial dividends from pursuing an export-oriented development strategy. And as you say, by opening up its economies and participating in global value chains, Singapore was able to industrialize and grow rapidly for long periods, and in the process transform itself into middle or high income countries. And the second point is a lack of natural resources and indigenous entrepreneurship at the outset of the industrialization, driving the 1960s means that the country had to depend on foreign direct investment from outside. And let me see the third point. Located at the mouth of the Malacca Strait, its strategic location and the natural harbor attract more than 40% of world maritime trade. Okay, next slide. And this slide is also about Singapore. I will continue to talk about this. Throughout its history, Singapore has remained tightly integrated with the global trading and the financial systems. And I will do an example. Trade openness has consistently high, staying well above 200% of GDP and reaching a peak of even though 440% before the global financial crisis. And the next point, for small and open economies such as Singapore, continued engagement with world markets is not a choice, but an economic imperative. Okay, the last point of this part, with little in the way of the resource endowment and the absence of natural economies and hinterland, small economies must depend on global markets, free trade, and unfettered capital flows to sustain their wealth. Okay, so now we will enter the next part. It is impacts of hospitality and tourism, and I will introduce this one of the parts with Bob. So the first part, tourism is a major and faster growing industry in Singapore. Despite the small contribution to the country's overall GDP around 5%, Singapore tourism industry lingers as a noteworthy showcase not only for trade and like economic powerhouse, but also as a hub for entertainment, media, and culture in Southeast Asia. And then my group member Bob will introduce the others here for you.
Hello everyone, my name is Huỳnh Hoài Nam Bob. Let me continue. In 1964, Singapore set up the Tourist Promotion Board, it's called STB, and to lead and promote the development of tourists in Singapore and to promote Singapore an international tourist industry. Next. There are some benefits in Singapore industry. In early 1980s, Singapore has made more money from the tourists than from any other commercial activities, including a sport field. Nowadays, Singapore is really popular as called Singapura or Lion City, with huge rank of famous tourist attraction such as Millennium Park, Mariana Bay Sands, and Resorts World Sentosa. In 1950, travel and tourist industry contribute SGD around 40 billion, which represent 10% of GDP. Moreover, travel and tourist industry generate almost 310,000 opportunity employee in direct and indirect ways, which account for 8.5 of total employment opportunity in Singapore. Moreover, the total account investment in tourist industry in Singapore was SGD reached 20 billion, which represent 20% of the total investment Singapore economy. There are some advantages that we want to show. The Singapore have to suffer from many consequences because the fast growth in tourist industry. Nowadays, the number of visitors to Singapore has slowed decline because that effect on the economic, especially according to the city tourist chief. Singapore could see 25% to 30% decline in tourist arrival and spending in this year because of the coronavirus outbreak. Besides that, air pollution also is another problem that Singapore have to face now. The main reason of air pollution in Singapore are emission from the industry and the vehicle. From time to time, transbordary smoke haze from the lands and the forest fires in the regions such as Indonesia is also affect on the Singapore air quality. Now let's start with Jason.
So, hello. So I'm Wei Zhang and you know me, Jason. And here I give you some analysis about our presentations, the economics and social change in Singapore. And to be more precise, Singapore is quite unique in comparison with other countries in the region because from the 19th century, in the 19th century, Singapore is a developing market, and by their strategies, by their successful campaigns, and also by the contributions of tourism industry, nowadays Singapore is known as one of the most famous and one of the 4 tigers in economy in Asia. So let's start. After the British removed Singapore, they have suffered a decline in spending and employment. And also after remove from Indonesia, Singapore have came up with focusing in tourism and infrastructure as their strategies to develop. And one of the first constructions to boost the tourism was the Jurong Bird Park. And after this construction was built, others has been developed enormously. And some legislations were passed in the late 60s in order to pave the way for the development of tourism industry. During the 1970s, tourism spent approximately $5 million in souvenirs, and this showed a positive sign in the development of this industry in Singapore. And in 1974, the Singapore Conventions were found to help and to improve the service for businessmen going into Singapore, and it's like a way to call it investment from foreign companies, organizations to the country, and recognize the importance of tourism industry. Former Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew called for $1.5 billion to invest in relocation the airport to meet his higher. And as Min Gong said above, Singapore has strategic locations in order to have it have more guests from other countries. And the 21st century marked the success in tourism in Singapore. The country saw a considerable success in tourism destinations given the site and limited resources. From the modest beginner in the early years of independence, their arrival reached the peak at 7.6 million in 2000, when the receipts total 5.6 billion. Nowadays, Singapore currently is considered tourism as an economic engine to develop their whole total financial sectors, and also to help the country maintain their success. And according to Singapore Tourism Board, in 2017, tourism sector currently contributes 4% to the GDP and also approximately 116,000 opportunities of job. Singapore tourism is marked as one of the most fast-growing tourism in the world today, and is known as like the transit, the famous destinations for many for many visitors. And according to UNWTO, Singapore ranked 6th in Asia and the Pacific tourism industry. And in the period of expanding and enhanced tourism industry infrastructure from 1986 to 1996. By the 1986, tourism account for 16% foreign exchange in Singapore, contributes 6% to the GDP and 6% of direct employment and many indirect job opportunities. However, like many developing countries, Singapore suffered from a huge problem that loss of authenticity and identity. However, recognize this huge and severe problem, the government has set up several campaigns as well as the strategies to maintain their own cultural situation. And here is some example, like preserving Chinatown and Pagoda Street master plan for conversations in 1987 to preserve Chandro Praja. And by this successful campaign, nowadays Singapore is known as like the cosmopolitan city, which is very famous for the combinations between the fast pace of life and also the traditional culture. And in the 1996 and in the 1990s, perfecting the jeweled plans were proposed to modernize existing entertainment complex building and also a lot of recreational areas. So in order to help Singapore develop more enormously. And finally is our conclusions. So in here we will analyze and summarize all the details of our presentations, and Chris will show you more details. Thank you. Chris.
Thank you, Jason, with all the information. So beyond that, I will give you the conclusion to the direct contribution of tourism industry in Singapore GDP from 1995 to 2019. Ever since gaining independence in 1965, the fishing village named Singapore has transformed into a bustling metropolis and became one of the 4 Asian economic tigers. Throughout the rapid economic development, tourism has been a major contributor to the economy by virtue the providing employment and boosting growth of many related industries. Moreover, in 2019, the direct contribution to Singapore GDP from tourism was around 4%. This was forecasted to increase to 4.04% in 2020. However, the direct contribution to tourism as a share of GDP would most likely decrease as the tourism sector had been hard hit by the virus outbreak. So that's all with the conclusion. And so this is the references in the text. Here you can see everything and every citation here. So if you have any question, you can ask me. And I think that is all for our presentation. Thank you for listening.
Finally. Awesome, guys.